Welcome to EFT Nation, your home for all things tapping. For show notes and resources, please visit EFTtappingtraining.com. We are your tapping hosts. I'm Alina Frank.
And I'm Craig Wiener. The information provided in this podcast is not a substitute for counseling or medical advice. The information presented here is meant to inspire and educate listeners, but are not guarantees of any kind.
Welcome back. And today we are discussing the window of tolerance.
The window of tolerance.
The window of tolerance.
Boy, I get quite an image of that. What kind of window does a window of tolerance look like? And what shape is it? And where on the house, in which direction is it? No.
It's funny because when I think of window of tolerance, the first thing that comes to me is Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
Ah, and why that?
Because, all right, let's say Goldilocks is the practitioner.
Okay.
And she is, she's helping her client, and one aspect of the problem is way too hot, and one aspect of the problem is way too cold, not even worth bothering to tap on in a session.
Right.
And the last one is just right.
Interesting. Let's talk a little bit about what the window tolerance is and where it would come into play for a person, for a practitioner, with
what does
with
it
regard
mean?
to EFT and what it means. So, the window of tolerance is a term that was originally described by Dr. Dan Siegel. Mm-hmm. Right, he did that. I think it was 1999, something like that, in his book. And what it is used to describe is really that zone of arousal that in which a person is able to function most effectively. Okay. So when somebody is in that zone, they're in a best state to be able to receive information, to process information, to integrate information, and to respond appropriately to, the demands that happen throughout your day without a lot of problems or stress. So in other words, you are able to meet the demands of whatever comes at you during the day and stay within this zone, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. The zone of being able neurologically, mentally, emotionally, to be able to process those things, to be able to flow with it, to be able to give best responses and make best choices without being thrown in one of the two extreme directions, which is being too aroused or hyper-aroused, right? Which is when we talk about the fight or flight response, or being kicked into that other direction of hypoarousal,
right,
or dissociative response, or going numb, checking out, those variations, and staying in that sweet spot that you're just talking about, that just right spot.
Right.
Right?
Yeah. So when you're in that window of tolerance, you are calm. Right? Could be. Or depending
that might be one word to describe it. You're able to stay in the zone without being thrown outside that window, without being, it might be calm. It might be the ability
alert. It's just being more present.
It's being more present, right. And it's being able to use your full capacities, your mental, emotional capacities.
Right.
Having those all still available to you. Uh-huh. Right? Whether it's in an EFT session or in your daily life, wherever it is. Right? So you're able to tolerate that stressor.
Yes.
That circumstance and respond the best that you're able to. Right?
Now, the size of your window of tolerance. So like you said, you could it's this window, right? This range of, on one end you go into fight, right? Or flight. And the other end, you're into like checking out and freezing.
Right.
Now, that range is absolutely influenced by your childhood traumas or your traumas in your life.
Sure. Because traumas
yes.
will be connected to, right? As Porges talks about, the way that your nervous system is wired, neurally conditioned to respond to different circumstances, mm-hmm. which may absolutely remind you of or be connected to past adversity and past trauma. And so when all of a sudden somebody drives by and they look at you in a particular way, You know, you might think maybe there's something in his eye, or who knows, I might have saw the reflection bad. Or if you have a trauma of somebody looking at you in that particular way, all of a sudden you get triggered, and now you're in a fear response or an anger or a defensive response because you got kicked out of that window of tolerance based upon your past traumatic experiences.
Right.
Has a strong influence.
And so with the use of EFT, you will be more, you will grow your window of tolerance. There will be more and more situations in which you aren't, quote unquote, triggered. You aren't activated. You aren't in one way or another.
And because so many of those triggers are happening unconsciously.
Yes.
Right? I mean, that's really what trauma does. It wires you in such a way that you become overly sensitized.
Yes.
Your nervous system sensitized to the sound, the look, the color, the circumstance that are connected to those traumatic events on a subconscious wiring.
Sure. You know, we've been enjoying reading the What Happened to You, the book by Dr. Perry and by Oprah. And there's a great story in there about that just illustrates this point. It's this boy who was raised in a household that was abusive, taken from the house, sent with foster parents, and the abuse was just in a different way, in a different like flavor of abuse. And so for his biological father, it went into like hypoarousal, and for it being with the foster father went into hyperarousal, and unfortunately this boy had an injury that led him to be in a coma. And so what the researchers did was they brought the clothing of both of these, the foster parent and the biological parent, and when they brought it to the child in the coma, they could see the brain activating either in a hypo or hyper arousal state. Really interesting how this all happens without our conscious awareness.
Absolutely. And the thing is that when we work within, that's what we all want in our lives, right? We want that widened spot that I can live in a variety of circumstances and have a sense of resilience, to have overcome the past traumas and done enough healing using EFT or otherwise to be able to be in situations in which they may even be uncomfortable. I'm asked to speak publicly. I'm asked to do things. And I'm not saying I'm not a little nervous, I'm not a little scared, but I'm not unable to speak, right? In other words, so that window of tolerance that's what we like to say is EFT is that great eraser that Gary Craig talks about, so that we can start to be in a greater and greater variety of circumstances despite our past, and still be able to negotiate and integrate and function as well as possible.
Right.
And, speaking about as well as possible, we can also bring in the idea of what is this zone of optimal arousal. Right.
Optimal arousal zone.
Right. And when we talk about that, it's really the ability to bring the intentionally, especially, the amount of arousal that is going to work best in a particular circumstance. So if I am going to speak in front of a person, in front of a group, or I am going to be involved in sports performance and competition, I don't want to be in a hypo-aroused state. I want to be amped up and functioning at my best, which is going to move more toward a more aroused state. Whereas if I'm needing to go to sleep, I want to be able to move toward a lesser aroused state.
Right.
So on one hand, my ability to bring the amount of arousal to a circumstance that's going to work best for me is another neurally developed skill that can be enhanced by EFT as well.
Right.
Just like people say in EFT, sometimes it makes them really relaxed, and sometimes it makes them really present and excited and ready to move forward. So there's different levels of arousal that are still within a window of tolerance.
Yes. Oh, let's definitely talk about this, because I have heard misinformed trauma practitioners, including EFT practitioners, warn that there are all kinds of side effects that happen as a result of doing the tapping, that you might go through something like a healing peak, what they call it, or that they're going to experience some headaches, or they're going to be weepy afterwards, or they're going to be nervous, or not sleeping, or not eating, or upset stomach. And they might even, I've seen people giving lists to their clients of these are all the possible things that can happen. And I'm here to say that the vast majority of that is because the practitioner is not catching early on the signs that someone is coming out of that window of tolerance, whether on one side or another.
Yeah, I mean, there's this balance here, right? Because anybody can have any kind of reaction because you don't know their history.
Well, hopefully you've gotten enough to know what is tolerant for one person versus another.
Right. What I mean to say is we don't always know how somebody's going to respond to EFT, and that can vary based on their history. What our job is to facilitate safely as best we can, gently as best we can, because we have to assume that there is a history of trauma even if somebody didn't reveal it.
Right.
Because it was forgotten.
Right.
Because they didn't think it was related or connected.
Yep.
So I think it's our job to always act as if there's underlying trauma beneath what we're working with and facilitate as if that may rear its head.
Right.
And therefore always go, as Suzanne Fagel, my partner, says, you only want to go at a pace that's as fast as the slowest part of you feels safe proceeding. So let's go through, what does that mean as a facilitator? Because as a practitioner, if you go too quickly and you dive into traumas too quickly in a first session and you're working on big T traumatic events before their subconscious feels safe with you, then they are more likely to have emotional meltdowns and ab reactions and move into that place. And you could say, well, it was there and it was ready to come out. Well, it may not have if you didn't force it open and go there with them.
Right. And so I know that you say that the slowest part of them is ready for
Feel safe going.
But you have to understand that there are such things as the trauma pull.
Right.
That prevents someone from really understanding that it's not safe to go there, and they just try to get it all out.
Right. So
the client, we're talking about the client.
Right, and that's always tricky because on one hand, as trainers and mentors, we tell people to follow your client. Let your client lead.
Right.
Don't you lead your client. Well, what if they're leading you into a trauma swamp?
Right.
Really quickly before they're ready to.
If you're a trauma-informed practitioner, you're not going to allow that to happen.
You're going to slow it down and say, let's work a little bit more gently. Let's work on some resourcing. Let's work on things that happened more recently.
Yep.
Let's kind of take the edge off and and see how you and your body responds to this tapping work first.
Exactly.
Before we get pulled into that deep, dark trauma swamp.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Excuse me. So, in a session, it is your job as a practitioner to let your client lead and follow the leads and the desires of your client. It's client-led work, except when it's deemed to be not safe. Right? And then you have to use your judgment and your skills to still keep rapport.
Like what you decide to do in a first session is going to be very different than what you decide to do in your 10th session with a client.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you are just learning how they tolerate the tapping, how it's integrating, how they're processing it. You are doing a little bit at a time, starting from recent, future, and present, so where it's generally safest to go, and seeing how well that works within their window of tolerance, looking for those cues, the voice, the visual cues that you're getting, the body language that you're getting, what they're telling you they're experiencing, and that will inform whether you proceed or whether it's too hot.
Right. And I mean, I think Gwyneth Moss was the first one that came up with that analogy of seeing eye dog, and I really look at, as the practitioner, I am the seeing eye dog. The person wants to go to the post office, the client, and they have some limited ability to see in a particular arena. But if they go to start crossing in the middle of the road while there's traffic, I'm going to stop them and I'm going to say, I'm going to get you to that post office. That's my job. Yep. But let's stop here. Let's go to the corner. Let's wait till the light turns green, and then we're going to cross in the crosswalk, and then we're going to get there that way. So that's that safety and that art of delivery, the facilitation skills that we teach that are trauma informed to keep somebody safe and to get where they want to go. Right? It's so very, very, very important. And it's part of what trauma informed work is understanding the role that trauma pulls you into a trauma pull, and where they want to go directly to the heart of it, but they may not be resourced or ready to be able to do that. And this continues after the session.
Absolutely.
Right? What about homework?
Yep.
Right? Are you going to let somebody start tapping on their own, significant traumatic events? I wouldn't as a practitioner.
No,
right?
That's not trauma informed.
Right. You're going to go ahead and perhaps the homework assignments are going to be more resourcing. They're going to be more gentle. They're going to be more about self-tapping for self-regulation. And when they're feeling stressed, about reducing the stress level, not about working on historical events themselves very early.
Historical events that are traumatic.
That are traumatic,
right.
Exactly. Very early in working with a client. So, that whole idea of the window of tolerance is very important for practitioners working with clients, but for all of us, it's looking at, when we're using EFT, we're expanding our ability to do greater and greater and more and different things that maybe we would early in our life not have chosen to because we were scared to, because it didn't feel safe to. And as we expand our window of tolerance, our lives expand, our opportunities expand, our willingness to try new things expands.
Right. And to come back into a place of being regulated when something does, throw you for a loop.
Well, I mean, to use EFT if it does. If you do start stepping outside and get dysregulated, when you start moving into being hyper-aroused or hypo-aroused, is to be able to use EFT for yourself to bring yourself back into that sweet zone of tolerance, right?
Yeah, and that's what we call, that's actually I would say that's a great definition of resilience. I mean, there's a lot of talk about resilience out there. Well, what exactly does that mean?
Well, resilience is the ability to have undergone adversity and traumatic events, and it's one's capacity to be able to respond in such a way to return back to a more neutral state.
So you're bouncing back.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, I hope this gave you some insights, some ideas, maybe where you need to tweak your work as a practitioner. Certainly a great resource is the Tapping Out of Trauma course, and there'll be the next round of that will be starting in September. We start in March and September every year, so it's tappingoutoftrauma.com.
Thanks for joining us today at EFT Nation. And remember that you can find show notes and previous epissodes at EFTtappingtraining.com.